Welcome to Yahoo Finance Sports Report, a unique look at the business of sports, brought to you by Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano, and I'm here to coach you through the financial game. We'll look beyond the headlines, analyze all the latest sports news, the teams, trades, and billion-dollar deals, so you and your portfolio will win big. This week, we're discussing Netflix's interest in Sunday afternoon NFL games, a new partnership between Nike and Kim Kardashian, the NHL's wildly successful Four Nations Face-Off event, and so much more. I'll also be joined by the world's #1 chess streamer, Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, to talk about the massive growth of chess over the past few years, chess's explosion as a digital streaming product, and Hikaru's new team for the 2025 Esports World Cup. Let's huddle up and get right into it. All right, it's time for this week's Pomps Playbook, where I take a look at some of the biggest headlines in sports that you and your portfolio need to know. First, I want to talk about a new report on the U.S. air travel system and its readiness for the 2026 FIFA World Cup and 2028 Summer Olympics. Last week, the U.S. Travel Association, a nonprofit organization that represents the travel industry, released a report saying that the U.S. air travel system is not properly equipped for the millions of visitors coming to the country for the 26 World Cup and 28 Summer Olympics. The 2026 FIFA World Cup will be hosted by the United States, Canada, and Mexico, with 75% of the games taking place in the U.S., while the 2028 Summer Olympics are scheduled to take place in Los Angeles. The report was authored by a coalition of former government officials and travel industry experts and highlighted the air travel issues ahead of the events for two reasons: old infrastructure, slow visa processing times, and they also mentioned outdated security technology. Out of all the obstacles facing the U.S. air travel system for the events, U.S. Travel CEO and President Jeff Freeman told ESPN that delayed visa processing times are the single biggest deterrent to visiting the United States. The U.S. Travel Association estimates that 40 million people may visit the United States for the World Cup, the Olympics and Paralympics, the 2025 Ryder Cup, and the country's 250th birthday in 2026. Of those visitors, the report estimates that 6 million people will come to the U.S. for the 2026 World Cup alone. The U.S. Travel Association told ESPN that the organization has met with White House officials about the country's travel system issues. The nonprofit is also recommending to the White House to implement a faster visa process and adapt new technology like biometrics for enhanced airport security. If the problems aren't solved, the report notes that the U.S. could be at risk for national security threats, lose millions of visitors, and lose even more money in visitor spending. Now, I'm optimistic that the country will be ready for the 2026 World Cup and 2028 Olympics. The events are too important to fail for FIFA and the International Olympic Committee. But it's clear that challenges still lie ahead, especially for the city of Los Angeles, which is dealing with more than $250 billion in damages from the recent wildfires. Next up, I'm looking at Netflix's interest in streaming Sunday afternoon games. Netflix Chief Content Officer Balia Bajaria recently told The Ringer's The Town podcast that the streaming giant is interested in acquiring one of the NFL's Sunday afternoon game packages if the league's media rights deals hit the open market. Now, as a reminder, even though the NFL's $110 billion media rights deals run through 2033, the league can opt out of those deals in 2029. And while NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell hasn't confirmed if the league will trigger its opt-out clause in 4 years, given the recent rise in sports media rights fueled by the NBA's 11-year, $76 billion package, I fully expect the NFL to renegotiate come 2029. The rights to the NFL Sunday afternoon games, which Netflix covets, are currently owned by Fox and CBS. And it's no surprise that Netflix is interested in adding more NFL content, as the streamer drew 26.5 million average viewers in the US for its 2 Christmas Day games in 2024. While Fox could be at risk for losing its afternoon package to Netflix, I'm actually keeping an eye on CBS. Why? Well, because CBS, which is owned by Paramount, could be at risk of losing its current NFL broadcast deal before 2029 due to Paramount's impending merger with Skydance. This is due to a clause in the NFL's broadcast deal that allows the league to renegotiate its contracts if ownership changes hands for one of its media partners. Roger Goodell didn't rule out the possibility of renegotiating the league's CBS deal once the Paramount-Skydance merger is complete in a July 2024 CNBC interview. And if that CBS package hits the open market before the NFL's 2029 media rights opt-out, there will likely be many potential bidders willing to pay more than CBS's current $2 billion annual rights fee, including Netflix. I'll be watching this story closely, as all signs point to Netflix becoming an even bigger partner for the NFL, whether it's in 2029 or possibly even earlier. Lastly, we're discussing Nike's new partnership with Skims. On February 18th, Nike announced that it's releasing a new line of women's activewear with Skims, the shapewear company co-founded by Kim Kardashian. Dubbed NikeSkims, the new line is scheduled to launch in the US this spring online and in select retail stores, and will roll out globally in 2026. This is the first time in Nike's company history that the brand has worked with an outside partner on a new brand offering. The move is seen as a way for Nike to gain back market share it has lost in women's activewear to players like Lululemon, Alo, and Viore, among others, under new CEO Elliott Hill. And while NikeSkims has yet to launch, the new brand has already been paying dividends for the swoosh. Nike stock jumped 6.2% on the day of the announcement, adding $6.7 billion in market cap for the company. The partnership can't be understated for Skims as well, which was co-founded by Kim Kardashian in 2019. Skims was most recently valued at $4 billion after its Series C funding round in 2023. The Nike partnership also highlights Skims' continued foray into sports. The brand became the WNBA's official underwear partner in 2024, sold Olympic collections for Tokyo 2022, Beijing 2022, and Paris 2024, and has featured professional athletes in multiple brand campaigns since its founding. The initial market reaction shows that Nike was wise to partner with Skims. Now, we'll see how investors react upon the launch of NikeSkims brand in the springtime. This week for the deeper dive, where I give you a play-by-play analysis of news in the sports world and its significance to your bottom line, we're talking about ESPN and Major League Baseball ending their national TV deal. Now, last week, MLB and ESPN agreed to end their national TV deal after a 35-year relationship. ESPN will finish out its contract in 2025, but the final 3 years of its deal through 2028 will now be voided. Now, this isn't a shock for ESPN. The network shut down its Baseball Tonight show in 2017, and ESPN reduced its MLB inventory from 90 games per season to 30 games per season in 2021. ESPN will save about $1.65 billion over the next 3 years, or $550 million annually. And MLB will take back inventory that includes an exclusive Sunday night window, the Home Run Derby, and a wildcard playoff round. Although ESPN was cordial in its statement about ending their deal with ESPN, MLB was the complete opposite. In a letter to MLB owners obtained by The Athletic, Commissioner Rob Manfred torched ESPN. Manfred called ESPN a shrinking platform and said MLB didn't appreciate the minimal coverage it has received on ESPN's platforms. While a new deal could still be struck between the two sides, Manfred's letter tells me that this relationship is probably over for good. MLB hasn't been a priority for ESPN, and Sunday Night Baseball averaged only 1.51 million viewers in 2024. Although everyone is saying MLB and ESPN mutually agreed to part ways, the reality is that MLB didn't want this to end. ESPN gave them no other choice. ESPN wanted to pay less for their games or get more inventory to dilute the price, and MLB wasn't going to let that happen. Still, this is a risky move for ESPN. They're about to launch their direct-to-consumer streaming service, and they now have to backfill the 26 slots previously occupied by Sunday Night Baseball. However, it's still unclear which network will replace ESPN for MLB. And while losing ESPN may hurt MLB in the short term, things could pay off in the long run. In 2028, MLB's current media rights deals expire, and the league can grow their media rights package by adding in local rights. MLB manages the broadcast for a handful of teams already, and about 2/3 of the league's 30 teams are expected to have their local rights available by 2028. MLB can then bundle those rights together and boost their rights fee by creating multiple packages for bidding, just like the NBA just did. Although MLB doesn't generate the same viewership as the NBA, it's still a valuable asset because of its massive inventory it offers during the summer, the slowest part of the sports TV calendar. While MLB likely wants to maximize the media rights to a multi-network package, I'd watch out for Apple TV. I don't have any inside information on Apple TV's plans, but Apple has shown it prefers to own leagues rather than rent games. This is exactly what they did with their 10-year, $2.5 billion deal for Major League Soccer, which made Apple TV the exclusive home to all MLS games and content. Apple TV then became the exclusive hub of MLS, a league that is still growing. MLB, on the other hand, is one of America's 4 major sports leagues with a dedicated audience. It's also a regional sport with a ton of inventory. That right there is the value proposition. Now, a lot can change over the next few years, but I wouldn't be shocked to see a streamer like Apple TV try to acquire MLB's entire media rights package in 2028. Because why only own a few games when you can own MLB's entire schedule? We've made it to the one-on-one, a conversation where I get to break down news and sports with a key player in the industry. This week, I'm joined by Chess Grandmaster, Hikaru Nakamura. Hikaru, how are you? Thank you for joining.
That's good to be here.
So I think the most logical place to start is just with the growth of chess over the last few years. I mean, you've been a grandmaster since you were 15 years old, multiple decades now. You've seen it all, both from a spectator side, but also as a player. What do you make of where chess is today?
Yeah, so I think chess is in a very, very good place. Certainly, when I compare to my life as a child playing chess, there's so many more enthusiasts. There's so many people following the game on the internet now than there were in the late 90s or early 2000s. And you look at a site like chess.com, which I think they crossed 100 million members recently, and the growth has just been explosive. And you also see chess everywhere now. You see it in commercials. You see a lot of sports stars and celebrities playing it. So it's just chess has been popping for the last 5 years now.
Why do you think? Obviously, chess is a important and historical game, but it's become part of culture. To your point, where you see it in commercials and things like that. But it's not even just in person now. Like you mentioned, chess.com, they have 100 million members. The fact that people are now playing each other online seems like a key difference from the last even 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there have always been platforms on the internet since late '90s where people have been playing chess, but I would specifically point to the COVID times or the COVID era where a lot of people were stuck at home. And one of the things about chess is there are many people who know what chess is, who play it very casually. They pick it up as a child and then you forget about it. And I think because of COVID, many people they started reflecting on their lives. A lot of people were stuck at home looking for something to do on the internet. And fortunately, a lot of us who were in the online space creating chess content were there. And I think a lot of people started picking up chess. They got really excited by it. There were a lot of peak moments. There were these competitions like PogChamps featuring very prominent streamers. There were also elite competitions online. And it really has never died down. I also think that's because chess is something where, to use like a finance term, I think there's a certain moat around the game from the standpoint that is evergreen. You know, you play one game of chess, you move to the next one, no two games will be the same. Whereas with a lot of, say, esports or video games, there is a clear conclusion. I think that ability to always see something fresh in the game of chess has just kept the fans coming for more.
For sure. And it sounds like a lot of this has been fueled digitally. Obviously, we talked about chess.com, but since COVID happened, more people turned to playing chess online, certainly more since the 90s and the early 2000s. You have been a key driver of that over the last few years with what you've done online. You have over 7 million digital followers today, 2 million on Twitch, 2.8 million on YouTube. Why did you feel it was important to start streaming online?
Well, you know, one of the big differences between me and quite a few of the other streamers is that I actually was a professional chess player, one of the elite players in the top 10 in the world for a very long time. But in 2018, I was a little bit frustrated with where my chess career was going, and I decided to start streaming kind of on a whim. One of the people over at chess.com, this guy, Danny Wrench, who's the chief chess officer, he sort of suggested that I do it. I picked it up, and really I did it because it was something that was different and it was fun, and it had nothing to do with financial reasons or anything else. I just decided to do it because I thought, why not try something different? Why not mix it up? And so then, you know, I started doing it pretty consistently from late 2018 through 2019. And again, I really look at the COVID boom as being something where, because there was so much interest in the game, there were things like Queen's Gambit as well, which I should not forget about. There was just one thing on top of another, and it really was like kind of fate or something like that. I think if you tried to plan something, you could not have it happen the way that it did in terms of all the great events and TV series and everything else.
And what was the reaction from your peers when you started doing more stuff online?
Yeah, so definitely the reaction was pretty negative. I think that one of the things with chess is it is a zero-sum game, meaning that when you play the game, someone wins and someone loses. And I think one of the difficult things, especially if you play chess at the professional level, is that you get really boxed in by this approach. And it's very hard, I think, to step back and look at the bigger picture, because you're simply looking at the board, you're looking at individual games or individual tournaments and how you do. And so most of them thought it was stupid what I was doing, and that basically it would go nowhere, it would hurt my professional career. But I kind of got the last laugh because it turned into something very big. And one of the other things I would say about chess is there's a lot of interest in the game, but it's also a situation where there are big audiences that are following several content creators. And I think it's almost impossible now for the top grandmasters to try and break in.
And why do you think that is?
Well, I think the single biggest reason is just that you have content creators like myself, Gotham Chess, the Botes sisters, and a few others, where our audience is so massive, and we picked up that audience during the pandemic specifically. And I think that one of the things, you know, people probably, you look at like content creation, you think, well, why does someone keep coming back for more? I think there's something to be said for loyalty, where when you've been doing it for a very long time, people become attached to the content creator in a different kind of way than you would see with someone who's just starting out. But I also would say, frankly, I think it's, you know, the algorithm as well. There's a lot of I would say statistics and data analysis to it in terms of when you're trying to make content, what you're trying to do. And I think that when you start from scratch, it's very, very difficult to understand. You have to, you know, make a lot of mistakes along the way, do that, and then you're also trying to play chess professionally. It's a lot.
We've got to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more of my conversation with Hikaru Nakamura right after this. Welcome back to Yahoo Finance Sports Report. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. I'm here with Chess Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura. How much time do you think you spend on the streaming side of things with your fans versus typical preparation that you would do before this for professional chess?
Yeah, so I mean, in the past, I would say that I would generally prepare for a couple of hours every day, pretty much. Whether there's a tournament coming up in a week or a month, I would look at something at least. But nowadays, I almost never look at. I never do any preparation except right before an event. So say I have a tournament in 1 month, maybe like 1 or 2 weeks before, I'll start trying to look at 2 3 hours a day. But other than that, I don't study chess at all. So from that standpoint, I mean, it's probably like 90 to 95% of my time is spent on everything except the actual preparation side of chess.
Yeah, and you mentioned that in 2018, 2019, you were really just doing this to change things up. You were a little frustrated with your career at the time, and chess.com had recommended you start streaming. It was sort of fun way to connect with the fans, and it wasn't really a business for you at the time. I feel like that has probably changed, but you tell me, right? You have over 7 million followers today. You're streaming on Twitch, YouTube, you're on Instagram, a bunch of other social platforms. Do you see it more as a business today than you did back then?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's 100% a business. I would say, I mean, it's effectively, in my opinion, like doing a startup. I mean, it's a little bit different from the standpoint you don't need funding. You just kind of go and see where it takes you. But definitely, it's a business, and it has been, I would say, probably since the middle of 2020, and that's primarily because with the big audience that were coming in, there were a lot more sponsorship opportunities. There were platform deals with groups like Twitch or Kick that were not even on my mind before. So it's definitely a business, and I look at it that way. I certainly am someone who tries to maximize it, but I would also say, to give caution, the one downside to anything involving online content creation is that it's one of those things where consistency is key, and it's something where if you take a day off, you'll lose some amount of viewers. You take a week off, you take a month off, the retention rate is going to drop. So you are in a way kind of stuck in a situation where you have to keep creating. And I think that's also why, for myself, being someone who's played chess, I've always thought about the long-term strategy, or where do I want to be down the road? Because I think that if you're just doing it day after day, it becomes routine, it becomes monotonous, it becomes boring. If you don't have a long-term plan, it can become very overwhelming.
Is it fair to say that you'll make more money as a streamer than you would have as a professional chess player?
Yes, that's definitely accurate. I think, the simplest way to put it without using monetary figures is that in 2020, I effectively made double what I made in my best year as a chess professional.
And what ways do you think are left for chess to still grow, right? Like, are there any untapped opportunities that you think chess can go into to continue to grow that audience? Obviously, COVID was huge, Queen's Gambit, we already mentioned those. But what do you look at in the future as something that, whether you're doing it or chess.com or the organizational bodies or other professional athletes, like what can happen in the chess community to grow the sport?
Yeah, so I think the biggest key to trying to unlock mainstream appeal for chess is having live events where fans can become a part of the spectacle. And one of the things that's very difficult about chess is it's a very easy game to pick up. Very easy to pick up, very hard to master. And if you don't play chess to a certain level or of a certain proficiency, you usually are going to struggle to understand what's going on. And I think the easiest way around that are, innovations like, having these bars where you see who's better, you see a big white bar, you see a big black bar, you see when the blunders are happening. But I also think you need games which are played with lower amounts of time. One thing for myself that I remember from a very young age is somewhat anecdotal, is that whenever I played in chess tournaments, if there was a game where both players had, say, 1 minute on their timer for the entire game, there would always be a crowd of people around it. That doesn't mean that people always understood what was going on, but they were very excited. You see the fast reaction. There's something there that's visual that you otherwise can't pick up. And so, in my opinion, the biggest way to try and do that is to have live events with less time than the current professional events. I would also argue seeing mistakes is a good thing. So I'm hopeful that down the road there will be live events where you have these very short time forms, say 3 5 minutes per game. You see a lot of mistakes. You sort of see the emotions. You see the human side to it in a way that you currently don't. If we can unlock that potential, where there are live events where you can have spectators, you can have merch, you can have TV rights deals, you can have these sorts of things. And that's really the big hope for me, is that something like that will happen down the road. I would also add there's the Esports World Cup coming up in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in July of this year, where chess will be a big part of it. And there will be a live audience there. So we'll see how that goes. But I think something around the live audience is very critical. And the last point I would make about that is that, I recently watched the show. I think it was on Vince McMahon and WWE. And, one of the things is wrestling, it can be a very serious sport, but you can also have the show like you do with WWE. And I think for chess, finding a way to separate those two where you have the serious nature, but you also have the show, if we can do that, the future and the opportunities are limitless.
Yeah, and why was the World Cup, the Esports World Cup in 2025 here in July, so important for you to participate in?
Yeah, so it's a very important event, first of all, because I've been pushing for chess more as an esports since 2020, but for whatever reason, it hasn't really happened. And to see this opportunity where players are joining esports organizations, getting these contracts that never existed before, it can only be good for the top players, and it brings more money into the game, it brings more eyeballs, and anything in that direction, I look at as a positive.
Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to watching, and thank you so much for joining us today, Hikaru.
Sure, good to be here. Thank you.
The clock is winding down here, but we have just enough time for some final buzz. So I want to talk about the NHL's Four Nations Face-Off. Now, it's safe to say that the NHL's Four Nations Face-Off experiment was a smashing success. The tournament, which replaced the league's 2025 All-Star Game, averaged 9.3 million viewers for its final between the United States and Canada. And overall, the tournament averaged 4.3 million viewers for all of the Four Nations Face-Off games on ESPN. Now, it's possible that the Four Nations Face-Off will be a one-off event we may never see again from the NHL, as it was meant to celebrate the league's return to the 2026 Winter Olympics, where NHL players will participate for the first time since the 2014 Winter Games. However, that doesn't mean international competition won't be an important part of the NHL's business moving forward. The Four Nations Face-Off essentially dropped the puck on the NHL's bigger plans for international play, as the league's players will play in best-on-best international competitions starting every 2 years in 2026. NHL players are set to play in the 2026 Winter Olympics, the World Cup of Hockey in 2028, the 2030 Winter Olympics, and the World Cup of Hockey again in 2032. And while the NHL may not benefit much monetarily from its players being involved in the Olympics, the league could score big with the World Cup of Hockey. The World Cup of Hockey, which last played in 2016, is completely owned by the NHL. The last edition featured 8 teams and took place in September ahead of the NHL regular season. However, the next editions of the World Cup of Hockey in 2028 and 2032 will take place in February during the NHL season and could replace the league's All-Star Game during those years, just like the Four Nations Face-Off did in 2025. Playing in February also means that the NHL doesn't have to compete with the NFL or college football. So, given the success of the Four Nations Face-Off, which is 4 participating countries, the NHL could be on the edge of an even bigger, more popular product come 2028. The World Cup of Hockey will provide fans with even more action to enjoy, and of course, more TV inventory for NHL broadcast partners. We're all out of time, so it's officially game over for this week. Thank you so much to Hikaru and for all of you for joining us. Make sure to tune into Yahoo Finance Sports Reports on Thursdays at 5 p.m. wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Joe Pompliano. See you next time.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.